Good evening, America. Welcome to your Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head, reporting to you from Los Angeles, California. As you already know by now, John Solomon, he's out on assignment and spending some very valuable time with his family, so it's going to be me flying this ship. All right, not solo, though, because we have an amazing lineup of guests tonight, including Congressman Burlison of the great state of Missouri, House Rules Committee member Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, and the Oklahoma GOP Chairman Nathan Dahm. And stay tuned, because my amazing co-host is going to make a quick cameo to bring you one of his latest exclusive offers, with great thanks to Tax Network USA. You know, the group standing up to the IRS on behalf of average American and small business owners. Now, in some other political news, Joe Biden is finally going to be headed up to East Palestine, Ohio, at some point within the next month to survey the Norfolk Southern train derailment crash site and meet with the residents, who some of which have been said to be struggling with health issues because of that. And although the crash occurred almost 1 year ago, the White House thinks that now is a good time to send the commander-in-chief. It must be an election year, right? Yeah, I think that's what we call a day late and a dollar short where I'm from in the South. Now, nevertheless, let's not forget at this point in time that it was Joe Biden's now presumed 2024 political rival, Donald Trump, who had already visited the small Ohio town just weeks after the incident occurred. I guess we'll have to wait and see when the White House announces the official date of his visit. Now, meanwhile, today over in the U.S. Senate, big tech and social media executives like Snapchat's own Evan Spiegel and TikTok CEO Shou Chew testified before the Judiciary Committee for a hearing that revolved around the safety of platform users, as well as with child exploitation online. And the Q&A between executives and federal lawmakers didn't come without emotional response, and that's because at one point, one Republican senator asked for Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg to stand up and apologize to victims' families who had shown up, many of which were holding images of their family member who unfortunately is no longer here with us today because of these platforms. Zuckerberg did stand up. He turned around and told these hurting American families that he is sorry for everything that they're going through. And in some other interesting news, Georgia's former self-proclaimed governor, Stacey Abrams, and her liberal voting rights group called Fair Right is laying off most of its staffers and reducing operations. This comes as the organization is expectedly going through increasing legal debts, with reported legal battles costing the group more than $25 million in just 2 years. Now, meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee is rather busy these days, especially as they gear up for Hunter Biden's testimony coming at the end of this month. The end of next month. However, today, the committee announced that President Joe Biden's brother, James Biden, he's going to be coming 1 week prior to first son Hunter's appearance to testify for his potential role in the House Chamber's investigation into the Biden family's overseas business dealings and impeachment inquiry. Now, if you see fireworks over on Capitol Hill in February, just know that they haven't gotten their calendar wrong. It's not 4th of July. It's just House Oversight and burning it up. All right, our first guest tonight is a member on that very important committee, as well as one of the very first members of Congress to co-sponsor legislation that sought to oust Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his role in our nation's ongoing southern border crisis. Joining me now is one of our Republican Party's newest America First freedom fighters in the D.C. swamp. He is Missouri Congressman Eric Burlison, and he joins us right now. Congressman, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Amanda.
Sir, I just want to give our audience a timetable of your activity up on Capitol Hill, because it's pretty impressive. You came into office about a year ago. You took the oath of office in January, and not long after that, you were already filing articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas. I know that this was probably something that you campaigned on, so it's a promise made and a promise kept. But I know you've got to be happy to see the process and the progress of what's happening with respect to that.
Yeah, I wish we could have gotten to this point 6-9 months ago, but we're here at least, and it's well deserved. I mean, this is an individual that for the last 3.5 years has completely shirked the law. The law requires that he have operational control of the border, and he, instead of trying to do that, he's willfully violated not only that law, but he is working to really undermine and make and fast track individuals into the United States. And so we've tried all kinds of attempts to try to stop this administration from or bring the attention to the heightened situation to this administration, but unfortunately they won't listen, and unfortunately we're going to have to. I think it's the right thing to do to impeach him.
Yes, sir. I know a lot of people feel that way, and that's going to proceed to a full floor vote. I was pretty shocked at the audacity of his letter that he responded with. He's been given 3 chances to show up to Congress and testify in person. He has evaded practically every time. This time he sent an 8-page letter, and he said something to the effect of, these false accusations do not rattle me. The audacity of a statement like that, the flippant way in which he has responded to Republicans on Capitol Hill, it's a slap in the face to Americans who have been affected by illegal immigration. And I know a lot of those are in your very state and in your very district.
Yeah, and it's a slap in the face to the Customs and Border Patrol agents who know otherwise. They have come to testify in front of our committee and oversight, and we heard directly from the horse's mouth how the policies of Mayorkas and the Biden administration have undercut their ability to do their job. If you ask Border Patrol agents, all the blame absolutely falls on the Biden administration and particularly on Mayorkas and his policy decisions. He has made dozens and dozens of executive orders. I mean, Biden has made dozens of executive orders and Mayorkas has carried them out that neuter our Customs and Border Patrol agents and make it very difficult for them to do their job. In fact, they basically are they're relegated to being the people that are carrying the bags, helping people as they're violating the law and crossing the border.
That's right. And sir, I want to ask you about the terrorist aspect of this because we can't ignore it. I know that you put out a tweet and you kind of outlined some of the numbers pertaining to what's happened at the border in December. There were 19 folks at the border who were apprehended, who were on the terror watch list. And at a time when we are seeing conflict with one of our greatest allies, Israel, in conflict with Iran, Hamas, the Houthis, however you want to categorize all of them, and also at a time when our relationship with China is very shaky. You've got FBI Director Wray out there talking about how he's worried that Chinese hackers are going to attack our infrastructure, our oil pipelines, our electrical grid, all of this critical infrastructure. And I just keep thinking to myself, well, we had a 700% increase in Chinese nationals coming across our southern border. If there really was concern on the part of someone like Secretary Mayorkas, wouldn't they be closing it down if for no other reason, just for the aspect of terrorism?
Yeah, yes, you would think. And look, the amount of fentanyl that's coming across our border and killing thousands of Americans every day, it should be enough. But the Chinese government is fully involved in this. I was just in a meeting earlier today where we learned that there are encampments, there's staging areas for Chinese nationals who are coming through and immigrating illegally into the United States. In addition, there are places where they're staging in Mexico. There's so many Chinese nationals in Mexico that a lot of the stores are putting up Chinese language or translations so that they can read it. But what they're doing is they're helping to launder money for the cartels and for this Chinese criminal syndicate.
Yeah, I mean, it's pitiful. I wanted to ask you about something with respect to the way that they are housing these illegal immigrants, because we have seen Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis sending these illegals elsewhere in the United States because, let's face it, so many of these border areas, they just don't have the ability to house all of these people. And when you think about the conventional definition of a concentration camp, we have this colloquial idea of what a concentration camp is because of World War II. But a concentration camp is just where you have a concentrated body of people. And when you see these processing stations that you were just talking about, these areas in Chicago and New York and even here in Los Angeles, aren't those concentration camps?
Yeah, and it's disturbing that we're throwing resources at this situation. Every dollar that we spend to provide food and shelter and aid is just a magnet to make it easier for people to come here and violate our laws. Look, there's an aspect of being being charitable and being Christian, and I'm a Christian, but I don't remember that the Good Samaritan took the injured individual into his home. He took him and paid his bills so that he could be taken care of somewhere else. There's a lot of Americans who are charitable, and they donate to individuals in other countries all the time, and that's a great thing. But when they're coming here, and it's not charity, it's forced charity through your tax dollars, and people are taking advantage of that. That has got to stop.
Yeah, I mean, that's not willful charity. That's theft by the government, and I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's happening on Oversight Committee, because we've got Hunter Biden, who's coming on, February 28th, the last day of the month, unless it's a hump year or a leap year. And then you've also got a week before that, you're going to have Joe Biden's brother, James Biden. James Biden, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was the last stop before that $40,000 went from he and Sarah Biden to 10% for the big guy, the $40,000 for Joe Biden. What do you expect to ask from him, and what do you need to know from him to use that in your questioning with Hunter Biden?
That's a good question. Yeah, I want to know why they took out cash. That would be one of the first questions I ask. I would also like to understand some of the transactions that they've been made. I want to ask about the $200,000 check that was sent from the AmeriCorps healthcare, the hospital chain that went defunct, that Jim Biden was involved with. Why did $200,000 of those dollars end up in the hands of his brother Joe Biden? I also want to know what is the all of these are written as a quote unquote loan repayment, but where's the loan document? Where was the origin money and the interest payments for this loan? And I have a feeling that there is no proof or evidence of any kind of any origination of these loans. I think that they're just trying to skirt taxation.
I think you're right. And sir, the last time we had you on, you revealed another reason that you are uniquely qualified to be investigating and gleaning a lot of this information, and that's because I think you said you were a former investment advisor. And something that stuck out to you in the SARS reports was what appeared to be overly funding. I think they were whole life insurance policies, which is a way to kind of mask money. You pour money into that, you withdraw it, and it's not taxable. Is that a thread that you're still tugging on?
Yes, it is a thread that we're still tugging on. I think that the Oversight Committee has got a lot on their plate, and they're focused on these interrogations or these depositions. And so, but hopefully, one of those questions that will be asked is about some of these insurance policy payments that were being made. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, speaking of vested interest, I know you have a vested interest in what's going to be happening at the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs heading there. So, Congressman, excited for you and your state, and we're going to have you back on again very soon. Thank you for being here. All right, everybody, I am off to a very quick commercial break, but when I return, South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman, he's going to be here with me to talk about the latest regarding the tax bill and more on the southern border. So we'll be right back after these commercials. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue our Straight Talk conversation from Capitol Hill with a guest who we are blessed to have on somewhat frequently. Congressman Norman has been telling it like it is up on Capitol Hill for quite a while, even if it rubs somebody the wrong way. At least we get something that the American people absolutely beg for, which is transparency. Novel idea on Capitol Hill. Joining me now is South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman, one of the most important voices on the House Rules Committee. Congressman, it's a joy to have you with me here today. Thank you for being here.
Well, my honor to be with you, Amanda. Thank you.
Sir, the honor's all mine, and I want to start with news from last night that articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas processed out of committee, going to be heading to the full floor. Unfortunately, I think that's where the road ends, because even if you're able to get a few swing state senators on the left side of the aisle in the Senate, that's where it goes. But what are your hopes for what's going to be revealed in the process of getting this to the full floor vote and that vote happening?
Well, first thing, Amanda, the fact that Mayorkas has continually lied to the committees as HHS director, he, to maintain that the border is secure is just false. and he's continued to do that. He really hadn't complied with coming in when they asked him to. We had to do this, and you're right, it'll probably not go anywhere in the Senate, but there's got to be consequences. And he's taking his orders from a Biden administration that is inviting this country to basically have another attack on our shores. This is a national security issue. And the fact that he's following Biden's orders doesn't negate the fact that we've got to deal with it. And who knows, whoever he puts in his place, if he does, in a timely manner, will be probably as bad. But we had to take these steps and let the American people see who votes for it, the impeachment, or who votes against him, both in the House and the Senate.
That's right. Get it on record. Sir, I wanted to ask you about the gravity of this situation because he would be the only second cabinet member impeached in history. The first one was 1876. So it took 100 years past the Declaration of Independence for a cabinet member to be so bad at their job that they got impeached. That's got to speak to how bad he is at his job, I guess, to put it as nicely as I can.
Well, in the history of the country, we've never had an open border like this, and particularly when you see the risks that we're taking. The fact that the money alone that we're spending, and Amanda, I did the math on the airline tickets alone. If you figured $300 for 8 million illegals, it'd be over $2.4 billion just on the airplane tickets. And our government is paying for them as well as giving them a phone, registering them to vote, giving them a photo ID, driver's licenses, and this is all in the name of power. So this is a national security threat. I'm glad Texas is doing what they're doing, and more states are going to have to do that. And when each town comes to us for funding, the sanctuary cities, we've got to have the stamina to say no. It's not right to do that. And plus, we don't have the money to do it.
I think you're right. And I want to get back to Texas in a moment. But first, I want to ask you, speaking of price tags, the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act, it's a bipartisan bill. I think the House is set to vote on it later on tonight. What do you think about this bill?
It's a bad bill. And the reason I say that, the provision in the bill that gives basically any child born in the U.S. that the parents do not, whether they have a Social Security number or not, they're immediately citizens. They immediately qualify for all the benefits. And it's just another roadblock when the next administration, whoever is elected on the Republican ticket, will have mass deportation. And this will just give another roadblock to stop those that are here illegally in the first place. They shouldn't be here. That provision alone. And the other thing, Amanda, this should have gone through the Rules Committee instead of going on suspension. And let's have debate on it in the Rules Committee. Let's have amendments that take place. This is the reason we fought so hard to get McCarthy to agree to that. And I hate the fact that Mike Johnson feels like the only way he can get it passed is to go through the suspension route, which requires 2/3 vote. But it's not the right bill, and I hope we can beat it. I'm not going to support it.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about the rule suspension in just a moment because I think that's an important aspect of this. But the child tax credit. So not only is it going to be eligible to children who are illegal immigrants, but it also is increased from $2,000 per child to I think $3,200 per child. This is billed as a $78 billion bill, but the Tax Foundation estimated that because of that child tax credit aspect alone, it could balloon to $1.5 trillion. That could be the true price tag for the American people.
Yeah, and it's much more than that, much more than the 1.5 trillion. Count the interest on that, because this is borrowed money. The other thing to note, this is like a cash payment. The child doesn't spend the money, the parents do, that are here illegally. And so this is a no-brainer. I get the Democrats like it because they're the ones that have caused this travesty to take place on our borders now. So it doesn't surprise me, but I hope it gets voted down. The Democrats will probably push it over in the positive way to pass it, which I just disagree with. But it is what it is. We'll live to fight another day.
Indeed, and you are one of those who I am always confident is just going to keep barreling through no matter what. I want to bounce back to the suspension of rules because obviously it creates a problem. You need 2/3 majority of the vote, and you're not, I doubt, going to get enough Democrats to vote for that. Why is that the process for this?
To pass it. And we proposed to Mike Johnson, we've had a lot of meetings, and to his credit, he's given us meetings where McCarthy really wouldn't. We've had other meetings with him to, take this child tax credit out based on the fact that it's not free money and it's way more, it's not offset. They didn't even attempt to offset it with some of the woke policies, the Green New Deals, the building border walls in other countries. And it makes no sense at all. But to not fight against this is very, I don't understand it with Mike, but he, to his credit, he gave us an ear and we've been meeting with him, but it's not going to happen. And the fact that Democrats are voting for it means that they like it, which is not good for the country because of the money that they're spending. And has it got some good provisions like depreciation, rapid write-off? Yes. But overall, it's bad, and nothing that really comes from the Senate is going to be a conservative bill because they're controlled by Democrats.
Yeah, there's a famous quote by P.J. O'Rourke who said, bipartisan is when my doctor and my lawyer agree with my wife that I need help. And anytime I see bipartisan and I see Democrats willing to cross over the aisle and vote for something, I've already got an alarm raised. I wanted to ask you, sir, about the culture up on Capitol Hill because obviously, Republicans expelled George Santos for some pretty egregious allegations, but they were just allegations against him. And then you have someone like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar giving speeches in native Somali tongue to a group of Somalis, basically expressing the fact that nation, not the United States, is her priority. And, I think that there is a pretty stark dividing line up on Capitol Hill between America first and America last, Republicans and Democrats. And I see, the translation of her words. And I just think to myself, doesn't she merit maybe a look into expulsion?
She really does. I mean, you take an oath when you are elected to Congress, should take an oath that you believe in to defend and protect America's interests, not Somalia or not any other country. And it shows where her allegiance is. And, everybody ought to take note of this and be very disturbed about it. And, you've got the things with Cori Bush now with ethics and, let the facts take us to the truth. And so, Omar should be investigated. You should look at it and be taken seriously because this country's in trouble. And we've got to have people who are pro-American, not pro-other countries. And we'll see how it works out with them.
Sir, speaking of what's happening with America, the fact that we are in trouble, with respect to the November election and the Republican majority on Capitol Hill, it's not going to be long before we're coming up at the end of this this cycle of Republicans. How important is it that Republicans retain that majority? Because I know even folks like you've got things that you want to accomplish that extend beyond November.
Extend beyond November and the issues we're facing, we've got to have a Republican majority because look what has happened. They say we didn't do anything, but look at the investigations that were never even attempted by Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. So we've got to maintain it and we've got to put America first. And even if we have a Republican presidency, which I think we will, if the House is not not putting forth good legislation, then we're back to zero. But we've got a lot of ground to make up, and we got to protect it. And we've got to, financially, we've got to protect this, get us on a balanced budget. Militarily, we've got to protect America and put the money where it should be. And the Democrats, we're on two different planes.
Yes, absolutely. Congressman Norman, we so appreciate your fight for freedom and transparency and fiscal conservatism. We look forward to having you on every time you allow us to have you on. And when John gets back from vacation, we're going to have to do it again very, very soon. All right, don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. You know, sometimes I actually find it hard to quantify how bad the Biden administration really is. But one phenomenon that we have seen time and time again, especially within this last year of Biden's presidency, is the amount of left-leaning news organizations and publications who have pretty much abandoned the 2024 Democrat frontrunner. Now, take this for a recent example. The editorial board of the Washington Post, who have a history of endorsing Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and most recently, of course, Joe Biden for president, they have put out a new article calling out Biden for his decision to pause LNG exports, citing the cause of economic turmoil and the very little that it will actually do to fight climate change. Now, before I get on a rant about this news, I think I'm going to take a step back and position this soapbox for my next guest. Tim Stewart is the president of the U.S. Oil and Gas Association and a good friend of the show who continues to speak truth to the Biden administration's wannabe power. Tim, I always tend to ask you about where gas prices are going to end up, so I'm going to skip over that because gas prices surprisingly fell a few cents this past week. But I want to dive straight to this LNG situation because it seems to me I've kind of seen a pattern with respect to a lot of the climate change initiatives, the green energy initiatives of this administration, and help me out and correct me if I'm wrong. Seems that there is almost always some type of study conducted by a very partisan anti-fossil fuel organization. You then have other organizations that take that. It's kind of what we in journalism call circular journalism. They're all taking this one little study and then reporting it through other organizations, and then it gets reported by the media, and then that's used as substantiation to wipe out these LNG exports for the state of Texas. To me, it just seems punitive, though.
It does. And, you know, it's interesting. We're seeing this kind of the same playbook. We saw this with gas stoves and other appliances and refineries and things like that. And that's what it is they seize upon one small piece and then they amplify. There very much is an echo chamber. Amanda, this LNG issue it's pretty complicated because projects are massive and they are very, very expensive, and they need to receive two major sets of regulatory approvals, one from the Department of Energy and one from FERC. And what we have here, the Biden administration, what they've done is they've shifted the balance of weight over to the Department of Energy to review the economic and environmental impact of these new projects. And in doing so, they open themselves up for much greater, for want of a better word, political manipulation, where FERC would be somewhat immune from that. And that's what's happened here. The really frustrating thing, to your point about the amplification process, is the New York Times itself reported that the Department of Energy brought in a 25-year-old TikTok influencer from Colorado and ultimately made the decision based on what he was saying where the youth vote was going. This is entirely a political decision rather than a national security or public interest decision. It's really, really frustrating from the industry's perspective.
Yeah, Tim. I mean, it seems like inmates are running the asylum daily over at the White House. I didn't expect for it to be a TikTok inmate. So I want to ask you, though, because even the Washington Post seems like they have taken a turn away from Biden with respect to his green energy policy. I don't know if they just think that he should be doing different things or more things. And I don't know if we have this tear out from WAPO, but Biden's LNG decision is a win for political symbolism, not the climate. Are they turning on him?
I don't know if they're turning on him, but sometimes there are decisions made by this administration that don't pass the red face test at all. And in this particular case, you cannot justify this decision from a foreign affairs and an international relations and an international trade perspective as a good idea. Look, U.S. is the largest supplier to Europe based on the Ukraine war, based on the restriction of Russian gas going to the Europeans. This was a commitment that we made to our European allies and to our friends in Asia that we would make up for the shortfalls. We're not good trading partners when we back away from agreements that were made just literally months ago. We're not reliable international security partners if we're putting them at risk and forcing them. But the other problem is it forces these countries to look elsewhere. They're going to look to the Middle East. They're going to look to other countries with less stellar environmental records to produce natural gas and buy their LNG. It's really just a silly idea all the way around. And I rarely, if ever, agree with the Washington Post editorial, but in this particular case, they got it right, I think.
Yeah. And I just want to put things in perspective for our audience. As far as Texas and their LNG exports, everybody, they are the #1 provider of that in the United States and the #3 provider of LNG exports globally. So when it comes specifically to Europe, Tim, as you were talking about, Europe has a very fragile energy market right now. And the fact that we are falling down on that promise is concerning. And you brought up the fact that if there is a vacuum created there, if we're not providing that to them, who are they going to get it from?
Primarily from the Middle East right now. I mean, the Qatar and the Emirates and others are more than willing to backfill projects and backfill orders that we can't for whatever reason fulfill. And again, it's surrendering market share. And voluntarily surrendering market share for future products and future commitments. When you build an LNG facility, you lock in 10-year contracts. You lock in long-term stability, financial stability for both the supplier and for the buyer. It's a really smart transaction. And the Biden administration, again, deathly afraid of losing the election. This is really what it's all about. They're trying to figure out where can they make up a margin of 1 or 2 or 3% here and there. And I think we're going to see a lot of really lousy policy decisions going forward coming out of the administration. Not that we haven't had any for the last 3 years, but going forward, we're going to see some real heartaches just based on getting them limping past November if they possibly can.
Yeah, I guess according to the Biden administration, turning away business and sending them to our enemies is good policy. Go figure. I never knew that in politics. Okay, I want to ask you about this graphic because you tweeted this out, and this is absolutely brilliant. For all of these blue-haired green climate activists across America who throw paint on the Mona Lisa in Europe and they stop traffic here. I think that this graphic is really important for them to see because a few weeks ago, it seems like the entire eastern half of the country was blanketed in snow and crazy freezing temperatures. And in this graphic, it is the share of U.S. energy delivered by source for the week ending January 19th of 2024 of this year. 62% of the energy provided was from natural gas, which I think is fantastic. I want to look at the other end of the spectrum, though. Only 1% was provided by solar, 2% from hydroelectric, and 4% by wind. Now, I'm going to take the weekend off and I'm heading to Palm Springs, and you know what I'm talking about. On the way to Palm Springs, there is this big wind farm that is almost always sitting still. Maybe that's why those numbers are sitting at 1%, 2%, and 4%.
It's a great point. Look, natural gas keeps the lights on during cold spells and keeps your house cool during warm spells. Renewables can help, but you cannot depend upon weather-dependent sources of energy if the weather isn't favorable, and that's the bottom line. And we have to be able to have more of all of the above if we want to grow our economy. We need to be able to have access to energy. That's what makes us a first world country, is affordable, reliable access to energy for all people. And look, that was proud. I said, let's get up to 70% next time. Let's go team. And I really do think it's true. Natural gas is the most dependable, most affordable, most reliable source of energy we have right now to provide that for that transition to a greater electrified economy. And we're proud to be part of that. The other side needs to kind of realize that they cannot get from here to there without us.
Yeah, and with respect to the renewable aspect of it, when you're looking at the East Coast with all of the snow, it's not great to see electric vehicles sitting on the side of the road because they can't, keep their range when the temperature drops below 32. All right, everybody, you may have heard me say this before about Tim, but I'll say it again. He has one of the most humorous yet effective Twitter accounts on all of social media. So be sure to go drop him a follow at US_OGA. Tim, you know the rules. When John comes back from assignment, we're going to be demanding you to return. We love having you on. Thank you for being here, sir. I'm going to take a very quick commercial break, but guess who's going to be on the other side? That would be the great John Solomon.
Welcome back to the show, America. I'm briefly interrupting Amanda right now because I have an amazing guest with an awesome product that I want you all to get to know. Who knows? It might even benefit you or someone you know. Right now and over the course of the next few months, the IRS will be mailing millions of pay-up letters. That's right. They're going to mail millions of pay-up letters. Just think about that. It can be an intimidating notice and process to go through, but you're not alone because Tax Network USA is standing ready to use their war room strategies to help and see if they one of the millions of Americans the IRS will waive a penalty for. That's right, you might be able to get a penalty waived. Here to discuss this more with me for this sponsored segment is the Vice President of Tax Network USA, Joshua Hanna. Joshua, what a service organization you're providing. This is really great stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you do on a daily basis to help Americans like me.
Thanks for having me, John. Basically, what we do is we make sure that taxpayers who have unfiled returns or owe the IRS money don't waive their rights and speak to the government, and get put on programs that are not beneficial to them. We have strategies that allow us to reduce and even eliminate tax debts.
Wow, that's so important. And I think you're right. One of the dangers is you go in unprepared or unarmed, and then you get yourself into bigger trouble. And that's why you guys become such an important intermediary. I want to talk a little bit about why the IRS is doing this. We've done a lot of coverage on this sort of crackdown that's underway. There seems to be a lot of focus on small business owners, individuals, and families, rather than millionaires and the rich influence peddlers. Why are they focused on little guys like me?
Because you don't have a tax lawyer, or the average Joe doesn't have a tax lawyer who can basically protect them and understand when the government is going too far and asking for things that they're not entitled to. Even visiting your home or your place of business, those types of visits should be scheduled, and you should have a representative helping you and navigating through the process to make sure they don't abuse their authority.
Yeah, so important to know your rights, know your options, and that's where your team becomes so essential. Particularly, you get one of these in the notice, like, what just happened to me? You feel like you got hit by a truck, and it's at that moment you got to make a good decision, not a bad decision. When you look out at the way the program is starting to roll out from the IRS, who's the most likely to receive these millions of IRS demand letters over the next few months?
Well, anybody who owes a balance or has unfiled returns, and businesses as well. They're going to be looking into a lot of, quarterly estimates, if they've been paid, if they've been filed, and you're going to get a letter if you owe even a penny to them.
Wow.
They're not, they're mostly focusing on balances over 10,000, but, if you owe them anything, they're going to be looking to collect that right now.
Yeah, that is a big push, and it's been well documented. We've been writing about it on Just the News, and I think people are starting to wake up to, hey, this is going to be a reality in 2024. All right, so the notice comes, then the next thing that might come is a knock at the door or a conversation with one of those IRS enforcement agents, the tax cops, if you will. What's their ultimate mission? When they start to reach out to you and you start to have your interaction with one of the IRS agents, one of the IRS tax collectors, what are they trying to do in that first conversation?
Their goal is to secure funds to put towards these balances. Their goal is to build revenue for the government. They're spending like crazy. I mean, everybody knows that. And this program where they're beefing up the IRS is designed to pick up the slack. And they're going to go after anybody who can pay them over a short period of time, or they're going to levy your bank account, garnish your wages if they can't come up with a deal with you. So it's very important that you have somebody that knows how far, again, I've said this, but how far they can really push this. The goal is to have your representative kind of put them in check and let them know that there's a legal process and they need to basically look and review all the documents that we provide before they even ask for any type of payment.
Yeah, so important. Knowledge is absolutely the most important power here to level the scales. The government's got a lot of resources. Little old guys like me don't have a lot of them, and that's where you guys play such an important role. There has been these reports of these 20,000 new enforcement agencies. What special powers have been conferred to them? What are some of the powers that they have when they get engaged in the conversation with you?
Well, there's customer service. Obviously, the lower tax balances, they're going to have a number where you call and speak to an agent. Most times you're going to wait on hold for hours and hours, and you're going to talk to a government agent who probably doesn't really like their life much and isn't trying to do you any favors, but they also have I think about 10,000 field agents that are going to be, knocking on doors and visiting places of businesses to collect balances.
Yeah, that's going to be a scary moment if that's your first interaction. Interest and penalties, they can be a little bit crushing. Tell us a little bit about how those can compound the debt you may already owe the IRS.
Well, the interest compounds daily, and the penalty is a 25% penalty, annual penalty. So it can stack up pretty quickly. And they make mistakes on those penalties too. And they only benefit from those mistakes. They're not charging less penalties.
Yeah.
So it's very important that our forensic accountants kind of review every single penny that has been assessed and make sure it's factual and true and just, according to the IRS manual.
Yeah, that's really great. One of the things I like, Joshua, with the partnership that Just the News and Real America's Voice has with Tax Network USA is that you've got some brilliant war room strategies and strategists who've been in the system a long time. They know who to go to, what to do, how to handle a situation. Talk a little bit about those strategies and how they can benefit someone who just got waylaid by the notice and, oh my God, what the IRS is after me. What am I going to do?
Well, the first thing you want to do is have a private conversation with one of our tax professionals. So we can set a strategy so we're not scrambling and trying to figure out what we're going to do at last minute. So once we put together this strategy, our tax professionals will call the government and basically understand what agent wants to play ball and what agent does it. If they don't want to work with us, we simply just get off the phone and get back on the phone with an agent that wants to work with us. And it's really, really it's a really great strategy because we have a special line with the IRS. A lot of your viewers are going to wait 5, 6, 7 hours. We wait no longer than 2 minutes to get through to a special direct line with the IRS.
Wow. And you have, we got about a minute left, but you've got experts who've been doing this a long time. They really know how to make the system work for everybody. Obviously, you want to get the IRS its money it's owed, but also to protect all of our rights. That experience is invaluable, isn't it?
It is. And the IRS, the rule for the IRS is any program that we agree on has to benefit both the taxpayer and the IRS. Okay. But when you handle it on your own, you really don't, you don't want to pretend to be a tax lawyer or an accountant. You don't want to pretend to represent yourself because you really don't know what the programs are that are available to you. So basically what we do is we make sure that we come up with a deal that benefits all parties, okay? And that could be eliminating the tax debt, putting it in a hardship status, or finding a payment plan, a small payment plan that you can afford at the lowest interest with no failure to pay penalties sometimes.
Joshua, what your team is doing and the partnership we have with you, greatly valued. Folks, if you want to take advantage of this, go to tnusa.com/justnews, tnusa.com/justnews. You're going to get the best help. I know how intimidating the IRS can be. Get this help, have this, even the scales. We'll be right back.
Welcome back for the last time this evening. All right, it's always so hard to believe how much we can work in within such a small amount of time. But our last conversation is just as important as our first. Secretary Mayorkas's impeachment may be coming around the bend, but one thing we do know is that the U.S. House passed H.R. 2 almost one full year ago, but it's been sitting on the Senate chamber's floor. And while this has prompted Republican senators to get involved in negotiating a border deal, some political policy arrangements are sparking major backlash from constituents, and that includes Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma and his voters. And my next guest has his finger on the pulse of what is actually taking place within the great state of Oklahoma. He is Nathan Dahm, and he serves as the conservative senator for District 33 in the Sooner State. He also serves as the chairman of the Oklahoma GOP. Mr. Chairman, there were reports about the state party censuring Senator Lankford over this border deal, but now there are reports saying that it wasn't a legitimate action. Can you please shed some light on this and set the record straight?
Absolutely. Glad to do so. There was a meeting that was held, but it was illegitimate because they didn't follow the OKGOP party rules in the proper procedure for calling for a meeting. They didn't invite over 100 elected officials, including the governor, the entire House and Senate. And so they didn't give the opportunity for all people to be involved in that. Now, I will say that there are people that are upset and disgruntled with Senator Langford even being involved in this, working on this. That's been evidenced. But the meeting itself, the censorship itself, was not properly done. And so as Republicans, we're supposed to follow the rules. We believe in the rule of law, whether that's party rules or the Constitution. So there are people that, yes, absolutely are very upset about the negotiations that are taking place. We still haven't seen the final outcome of what this deal might be, but people are very upset about it because we are being invaded by the policies of this Biden regime. So that's kind of where we're standing right now in Oklahoma. People are upset, but I'm just, as chairman, saying, I get that. I hear your frustrations, but we still have to follow the rules. We can't devolve into the party of the left where the ends justify the means.
I wanted to ask you, because I'm not saying this specifically about Senator James Lankford, but something I've noticed, the dynamics of politics in America, sometimes it's the reddest states that have some of the most squishy Republicans. And I think that it's because you have such a huge pool to vote from, but you have these people who have been a part of Oklahoma's Republican establishment for a long time. You see the same thing in states like Arkansas and sometimes in Alabama. And do you think that that's a part of the dynamic as far as the disgruntledness of these voters against Senator Lankford?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've seen that where we have strong Republican states where we have elected Republicans in the House and the Senate that are less conservative than their constituency. We've seen that throughout the country, as you mentioned, and even in Oklahoma. A lot of elections come down to name ID or just the fact that you have an R next to your name. And so there are those contingent factions that would say, well, the R next to your name should mean something. It should mean that you agree with the party platform, that you uphold the Constitution, not just that you're necessarily a nice guy. And so we are seeing that play out across the country. But ultimately, it is the role of the voters to determine who the candidate is. For instance, in our OK GOP rules, we can't get involved in the primaries. So that's not the role of the party. That's the role of the grassroots, of the activists, of other organizations to get in there and make sure that we get the most conservative candidate through the primary so that they can actually be the nominee in November. We're starting to see that more and more. I think people are starting to kind of awaken to that it's not just enough to vote in the November for whoever has the R next to their name. If you really want to make a difference in moving things in the conservative direction, you need to get involved in the primaries. So we are seeing that. But again, I'm trying to make sure that as the party chairman, that we focus on following those rules. If people want to change that, we can change the rules. But until we change it, we got to follow the rules.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, get involved locally, and things will change much quicker. I want to ask about what's happening there where you are. You are in, I think it's Nevada, where the RNC's winter meeting is taking place. I know that election integrity is something that I would imagine that's probably the most talked about conversation there because it is of the most concern to Republican voters. Do you see improvements happening? How much faith do you have that the RNC is really, grinding the gears to make sure that election integrity is even a little bit better this time around?
Absolutely. It is something that the RNC is focusing on. We have our legal counsel who has been leading the election integrity committee, and he's doing a phenomenal job. It's something that we have heard from our constituents on, from our grassroots on. I've heard from other people that, they're disgruntled. They think their vote doesn't matter because the other side is going to cheat. And what I've told them is when you're playing, if you want to use a sports analogy, if you're playing another team that constantly cheats, that has paid off the refs, you just have to be so much better than you can supersede any way that they try and cheat. So we have realized that at the RNC. They've acknowledged that we need to be focusing on election integrity. And so that's part of the reason that they're doing the Bank Your Vote plan across the country to make sure people get out and vote early so we can beat the Democrats at their own game while still following the rules, trying to expose how they're cheating. But also, if we have big enough turnout, if we run up the score high enough, we can overcome their ability to cheat.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly before we go, we got about 30 seconds. If you had to grade Oklahoma's elections as far as integrity, what grade would you give it?
We have some of the best in the country. I would say we're at an A, but in my role as state senator, I've worked to improve it. For instance, I'm trying to make it to where all of our ballots have to have a special watermark on them just to add that extra layer of security. So we're always working on improving them, but Oklahoma's elections are very, very secure and very well done.
Fantastic. You know, I am a big fan of overachieving, especially with respect to election integrity, and you are doing a fantastic job. We appreciate you being here, sir. I know you're very busy. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me on anytime.
All right,
Appreciate it.
everybody. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to believe it, but we are at the end of the hour. Once again, Grant Stinchfield is going to take you through the next hour of breaking news and the latest headlines. So be sure to catch up with me right here tomorrow night. I've got Border Union VP Art Del Cueto, among other several great guests.